Welcome listeners to episode 31 of the Running Guide podcast, where I aim to provide informative content and interviews with elite athletes and health professionals around the world, like in today's episode, where I'm chatting to an Aussie legend of distance running who's represented Australia at multiple World Cross, World Champs, Com Games and Olympic Games, and currently has one foot on the plane to Tokyo next year for her fourth consecutive Olympic marathon. Welcome to the Running Guide podcast, Lisa Weightman. How you going, Lisa?
I'm going great. Thanks for having me.
No, fantastic. It's great to have you on the show. Been a bit tougher for you Melbournians down there during this COVID lockdown. Must be nice to be returning back to some sort of normality.
It has. It's lovely to have a goal in mind. It's lovely to be back on the training track with all that freedom. So, yeah, I certainly can't complain down here now. It's given us an opportunity to use some of that resilience that we learn when we're preparing for a marathon, hey?
Certainly had a lot of practice of that. Now, you're one of the inspiring elite female athletes around the world that sort of juggles representing your country with a working career and motherhood, which is an amazing effort. So I'm just wondering, what sort of structures have you sort of implemented over those years that sort of allows all those responsibilities to sort of mesh together?
Yeah, I've got an amazing family. So they're the key, really, with parents I've got my husband's parents are in Creswick, just outside the running mecca of Ballarat. So we spend a lot of weekends there training around the forest and meeting some of the Ballarat locals on weekends for some runs around Vic Park and of course, around Lake Windaree.
Sure.
And Pete gets looked after, our little boy. He's just turned 6, so he has wonderful fun in the country while we're out doing our training with his grandparents. And then we've been really fortunate that my parents only live, half a K away. So my parents, my sister, we're all in a little bit of a triangle where we live. And so Pete's, well looked after while Lachlan, my husband, and I get all the training done. So that's how we do the whole juggle in the last sort of 6 years. But prior to that, I've also had full-time job, as has Lachlan. So I'm at IBM and, coming up to a couple of decades, I think, there. And Lachlan at ANZ Bank. And we just, we live out of our cars sometimes with training, have our clothes in the back and finish work and jump into the running gear and run to the location that we want to do our session and all of that. So, yeah, one beauty of running is that you can fit it in anywhere as long as you've got a bit of organisation and you've packed right. So, you just try and squeeze everything into the exact moment and no time to procrastinate. I think that's key.
Yeah, no, definitely. What sort of running is Lachlan doing these days? Does he compete in fun runs or what's he up to?
He's pretty much been helping me. He was going to run and pace Chicago Marathon last year for me. And, we had some pretty big goals to hit a good PB in Chicago, but I ended up getting food poisoning and he ended up breaking his sacrum. So, all things were geared towards us both having a good PB in the marathon in Chicago. But, things don't always come to fruition and go to plan. So he's attempting that again with me next year. So we'll try and chase the goal that we had for Chicago last year, and now we'll just try and chase it in 2021 instead.
Fantastic. Look, let's chat about your PBs, and you can sort of fill us in on the details around these events. Now, some of the World Athletics times sort of vary from what you have stated on your blog site, so probably World Athletics needs a bit of a refresh or an update. So I'll just get you to correct them as we sort of work through them. So let's kick off with your 1500 metre down there in Melbourne, December 2005, where you ran a 4:23. How's that one sound?
Oh, do you know, I would not be able to recall that.
Sure.
That's like back in the olden days,
Yeah.
Isn't it?
As the kids say, yes.
Yeah, look, I can't recall too many. I remember as a junior, probably the only 1500 that really sticks in my head as a bona fide trying to be a 1500 metre runner at the time was probably a schools event when as a youngster, Dad and my sister and I drove up to Canberra and ran nationals, and I ended up getting stepped on the back of my shoe by another competitor and ended up having to kick the spike off because it was half off and running the race with only one spike on. So so I think they're the types of memories I have for 3K, 5K events back as a junior. more so than anything as an adult. I think I certainly moved up the distance in my sort of late sort of mid 20s, and anything on the track, shorter than 5K was something that was just an experiment, I'd say, at the time.
Yeah, sure, sure. Well, I'll give you the 3,000 metres, and this was only a year later, so again, you may not remember it. There's 9:22 in Melbourne in November.
Yeah, I can't remember, honestly, that race. I think I went on to do some time trials, I think, with Lachlan later on, just out at Doncaster, and ran a few 9:11, 9:13. So I think I can remember those more than I could actually remember the races. Yeah.
Well, maybe the 5,000 you'll remember because it was over there in Eugene, Oregon, April '07. You ran a 15:54:31.
Yeah, I do remember that race. It was really fun. I actually won the run for the kids, I think, and we got a voucher to head over to, it was 2 flights to San Francisco for the very first run for the kids. I was really desperately trying to break 16 minutes. And so we thought that would be a fun way to do it. So yeah, it was great. I remember Lauren Fleshman got onto the start line of that event and was cheering everyone and saying good luck. And I definitely recall that, that early part of that race and how positive and inspiring those girls were, before the gun actually went off. And and then later I think I ended up running faster than that in a mixed race, just slightly, with a 15:51, running pretty much most of the race in lane 3 when Aberfeldy had an interclub 3K and there was about 50 athletes in the race. So that was a fun experience as well, just running around in lane 3 and getting a PB. So it's been a long time since I've ran too many 5Ks on the track since then. So certainly been in much better shape, but haven't really had that opportunity or had the desire to jump back on the track at the time. The marathon's always been the number one focus.
10,000 metres down there in Zatopek 2009. We'll talk about that a little bit later. You've been pretty consistent down there in Zatopek every year. So you ran 32:20:14 in 2009.
Yeah, that race was a lot of fun. Such an amazing field, wonderful group of girls that we all supported each other and helped each other in that event. I remember sitting in, and I remember feeling like it was one of the Zatopeks that I actually felt really comfortable in. I think there's been quite a few Zatopeks that I've felt woeful in, and that one was one where it just seemed to tick along. Every kilometre just seemed to tick by, and I think I lost a little bit of concentration in that last kick, but was able to come back through to get second to Eloise. So yeah, certainly proud of that day, but yeah, I probably just needed a bit to kick the concentration into gear when the kick happened a bit better. But that's I guess race experience on the track that I don't have a great deal of. Maybe I needed to stick at the 1500 a little bit more to be ready for all the moves.
All right. Now, you should remember this one. It was only last year, the 10K on the road up there in Sydney in July, 31:55. Was that your first sub 32 on the road?
It was, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, look, I love the Sydney Harbour race. It's such a great vibe. It's beautiful weather. The team looks after you so nicely. It's just a really special event. The start line's really pretty where you see all the older buildings in the bottom of the bridge. And yeah, it's just a really positive event. And I always feel really happy when I'm there competing in that one. So that certainly does put you in good stead for a positive opportunity to run a PB. We got some really nice conditions. I think your footing gets a little bit slippery early in the morning on parts of that course, just because tends to be all the cleaners and the street sweeping that's done, bright and early. So you have to just watch your footing and going around corners. But yeah, I felt really, really good on the day. I'd trained really well. I'd had a really good lead up, and my training was getting geared up towards running a PB, was the plan for Sunshine Coast shortly after. So, we just off we went, and with a group of guys, and I was fortunate to have Locke to help me as well, just to keep pushing me along. And yeah, it was really good. We got to get that sub 32 finally.
Yeah, no, fantastic. Sunshine Coast, you mentioned that's where you got that incredible PB up there, half marathon, August 68:48, beating your old Australian All Comers record of 69. That was a great event. It was yeah, it was fantastic with a bit of a bonus for people to chase. So yeah, tell us about that one.
Yeah, we Lachlan didn't run that day. He was on parenting duties, so he and Pete. I think he had the harder job actually, because I think he had to piggyback Pete all the way to the start line and back, which was a fair hike from where we were staying with a little boy who was quite excited. So I think I actually got the easier job running the race and doing the piggyback. But yeah, we had a good weekend. I knew I was in good shape. So it was just a case of making sure that, we ran smart, and, it was great that we had some good weather on the day as well, because that always has a positive or negative impact depending on what the weather brings. Yeah, look, it was a well talked about opportunity. Everyone was, talking about who was going to win and what times people were going to run. And so I guess that made for a bit more of an interesting race experience for everybody, knowing everyone was watching and wanting to see the end result. But yeah, we worked well. I didn't realise that Collis was pacing until just sort of that night before at the team meeting. So once we learned that, then just sat in on the pace. We went through a little bit slower than what I was expecting to go through, just to make sure that we got that record and got that sub 69. But then that just meant we just needed to work a lot harder in the second half and come back really strong, which I ended up being able to do, which was great for my confidence, and knowing that, negative splitting is something that I can do, and also knowing it's something that I can do now with all the experience and as an older athlete. I have a lot more confidence in my ability to do that now. It was a little painful in that last mile, I have to say. I was absolutely running my legs off, making sure that I went under that 69 minutes and got the opportunity to take the title home. So yeah, a really special moment, and lovely to have friends and there as well, running and achieving their own personal best at the finish line. So Max and Nick were there from Melbourne Uni, and they were really supportive. And yeah, it was lovely to have Locke and Pete at the finish line, and lots of hugs all around. So yeah, they're the moments that you cherish, I think, in sport, that's for sure.
No, definitely. No, fantastic day it was. Marathon, 2:25:15 over there in London, 2017.
London was great fun. We had a great group over there. It was really nice. The Aussies were all together. Having the opportunity to race in London, it is always a special moment, and it always feels very picturesque and magical, especially when you run across the bridge, at that halfway point, just before the halfway point. In the marathon, I knew that I was in good shape in the lead up. I obviously didn't really know what shape yet. That was when we didn't have carbon plate shoes and all of the fancy foam and all of that. So, it was just before that, that all of that shoe stuff kind of took off. Unfortunately, I got a blister or my toenail fell off at about 37k, and it was like felt like I'd been shot in the foot. So I was really not enjoying that part of the race. But it took, I guess, we started out a little bit slower in that race, and we had a couple of pacemakers, but the pace wasn't on check. And so I remember kind of trying to push the paces a little bit in the first sort of 10k, and then in the end, when I got to 17k, it just wasn't fast enough for the PB that I was chasing. And so, because obviously at the time I was a 226 low runner, and I wanted to get into the 224 or 225 zone. So it was a little slow coming into 17k. So I had to make that sort of decision, which I was grappling with from 15. Do I just give it a go and just go on my own, or do I just, sort of mosey a bit longer, and then my PB dream would start to dwindle away? So I just decided it's time to just take it myself and just go for it. So yeah, so off I went at 17, and then Laura Thwaite from the US, she came up also, and I don't know if she went straight away, but she then decided at some point to come as well, and so we ran a little bit of the middle part together, and then I could see some other Africans well ahead, and so just started to run and chase them down, and yeah, and it was a really fun experience coming in past Buckingham Palace and knowing that you ran a PB, and yeah, we got to have really good celebrations and enjoy the moment, and also obviously have some friends and very close friends in London, so we got to then enjoy achieving that goal with them for the next week before we took the journey home.
It always makes a lot more special when you have that environment around a great race as well, doesn't it?
Yeah, it was really great. And I had Jess there, and she ran well and ran a PB, and Michael, and yeah, so just really nice to have that, that core team around you. That yeah, we were all pretty. We sort of connected really well with Laura as well, given at the time she was being coached by Lee Troop, and yeah, so it was really nice to have like that that team to look out for each other and yeah, celebrate each other's achievements.
Now, you've been coached for many years by the great man Dick Telford. I really enjoyed interviewing him last month. He's done so many great things for running. Now, Dick was a high-level Aussie rules player in his early days and played a lot of footy down there, and also coached the Preston Football Club, and actually coached your dad as well, who also went on to successfully coach Preston. So tell us about how that story goes and how Dick ended up being your coach. I assume it's got to do with that connection.
Yeah, so obviously Dick knew me as a little baby coming into the world through the footy connection, and yeah, Dad and Dick and the late Bruce Reid were very close, and so I was very fortunate throughout my career. I've been fortunate to have such wonderful and talented guys in my corner looking after me in terms of medical support and physiology and coaching and just general mentoring. Things that you learn as an athlete are certainly in my life are certainly similar, and you can use those things in your everyday life and work life. So some of the things that I've been taught through Dad and Dick has been given me the resilience to get through a whole lot of other things that are non-running related, which has been a fantastic opportunity for me. But I remember, so when I was in my younger years, I kept getting, every time I tried to do some track work, which is why my track stuff is very, there's not that much of a story in all of my track times, is because every time I tried to get on the track as a late teen, early 20-year-old, I kept getting stress fractures in my tibia. And so I had so many stress fractures in my tibia that I don't even have enough fingers to count them all. And so I missed a lot of time. I could get myself going in the cross country season, but the minute I hit Olympic Park on the Mondo surface, I'd just get really sore in my shins, and then that would develop into something more sinister. And then I'd miss, a block again, and this kind of just kept happening. And so I was really lucky to have Dick as a mentor. I ended up I think it was around, can't quite remember the years, but I think it was around the year 2000. I decided that I wanted to go up and run the Noosa half marathon. And so my sister and I went up for the trip, and Dick was up there with one of his athletes, and he spends a fair bit of time in Noosa, so it was fortunate that Dick was there. And I, funnily enough, got a bit of a stress reaction in the lead up to that event as well, my first half, but I was so determined I was going to run it anyway that I ran and got third, I think, in that race. And at the finish line, I went and had a chat with Dick and talked to him about my situation and what was happening to me, and asked him if he could give me a bit of advice. And so at the time, he was like more than happy to help give me some advice. And he didn't obviously at the time know that I would then go on to achieve what I have done. But he was more than welcome to help me get out of this conundrum I was in. And yeah, so he helped myself, and at the time I had my junior coach Jeff Hawkins looking after me, and so he worked with Jeff and gave some ideas and set out a bit of a plan to try and get me uh, keep me on the park basically. And yeah, and then I still got a couple little bits and pieces happened here and there along the journey, but I think from there he introduced me to Pam Turney in Melbourne, and I started running with the girls group around the Tan with Pam, and with Dick remaining as a mentor, and Pam took the reins as coach. And that gave me a really good opportunity to train with, some really great girls and make some great friends, and really push myself. And that took me then to cross country and world cross country. And Pam was amazing in really teaching me how to be a really great cross country runner. And then we decided at a particular point in time that, it was time to give the half another go and the marathon another go. But I had to hit some times before in the half before Pam wanted me to have it tackle the marathon. So we set that goal and hit those times on the Gold Coast in the half, and then from there we progressed to the marathon. And so yeah, so that's sort of how that journey progressed. And Lachlan said to me one day, I'd made the team for the World Cross Country Champs in Glasgow in 2008, and Lachlan said, "Why don't you run London Marathon? The Olympics is is that year, and you'll be over there already. Why don't you just give it a go? You never know, you might qualify for the Olympics." And so I ran. I had the opportunity to run London, and I got into the elite field, which was fabulous. And yeah, time trialed a 2:32:20 for my first one, and was fortunate that Athletics Australia picked me to join Benita and Kate at the Beijing Olympics. And so from there, we progressed to World Champs in Berlin, and Dick started coaching me full time from 2009, from the basically just after just around the early part of 2009, which is when we went to World Cross in Jordan, and then on to the Berlin World Champ Marathon. Yeah, and so we had a great result there. I think I finished 18th there. It was really hot. I remember feeling extremely sunburnt by the end of that one. And we were out, I think the race started about 11 in the morning. So we had ice vests and towels and things on it, just to try and combat the very warm temperatures that we had there. And that was my initiation into running hot weather marathons for Australia.
Let's talk about your 10,000 for a bit. I mean, as I mentioned before, you're at Zatopek there very consistently. I saw in the early 2000s you were sort of running around the mid 35 range for the 10K and on the road. 4:05, you started to just crack under the 35 there. You're running a bit quicker on the road, including over there the Ekiden relays in Japan, which I want to hear more about soon. Then in 06, you had a big leap in performance down there in Zatopek. You finished second, running 33:25, so quicker than those 35s. And 12 days earlier than that, you took out the Ron Clark Classic 5,000 metre in 16:07. So what do you feel you were sort of doing that gave you that big jump up? Was it just more Ks in the legs? Were you upped your volume? Was it changing your training techniques?
It was injuries. Okay. So yeah, in those 35-minute 10K zones, periods in my career, I spent most of the year injured. I probably spent more of the time injured than I did training, to be quite honest. Okay. So yeah, it was really, I just could not shake the challenge I was having in my shins. So I was just getting shin splints, which was turning into stress reactions, which then turned into fractures. And it was just this, I guess we had to just play around a bit. I had to keep trying something different. The doctors and medical folk said run on grass, but I think that actually really hindered me. I'd run on grass, and then because the surfaces weren't even on the grass, then that would kind of exacerbate the challenge I had in my shins. And I was working and studying as well at that time, so I certainly wasn't training like an elite athlete, or like our top juniors do right now. I was trying to work to pay off a uni degree, I was trying to, finish my degree in business information systems. So I was working pretty hard doing those, working a job and studying, and then trying to fit in some running. And then when I first started my career, I started as a graduate at PricewaterhouseCoopers, and I was working till all hours of the night as a graduate, proving myself and finding my way in my career. So, I look at it and look back now and I think, I wish I hadn't have stressed out as much as I did about my injuries at the time, because I think that, what happened to me as a junior and the time that I missed and the injuries I had kept experiencing were probably just, the way the universe worked out for me, because in the end, I'm really fortunate to have a great career at IBM, and I'm really fortunate to have all of my, family life all settled nicely, and I've been really fortunate to achieve the results I have in the longer distance events, which really is where where my talents lie. So I think in the end, even though at the time it was pretty frustrating to just continually get sore all the time, that once you get to my age, coming up to 42, and you start to realize that there's that sweating those times is kind of a bit of a waste of energy, because in the marathon caper, it's certainly the latter years that you really hit your straps. So so it was all just meant to be, but at the time I didn't know that, as a youngster.
Yeah, no, it's a good positive philosophy to have on that. But with the tibias and the stress fractures, obviously they're looking at load, but they're looking at the way you were landing. Was it anything to do with that, or was it just load related, or the fact that maybe you weren't recovering because you've had all those other stresses in your life?
Yeah, look, I think it was a bit of a combo of all that. I think it was certainly about load. I think it was about that the body just wasn't ready for that kind of training on the track, that intense training. And because I couldn't do all the other things, didn't have time for all the other things that you need to do when you've got some things that have to be worked through. It just exacerbated it. I was always trying to just fit in training because it couldn't be the number one thing in my life at that time. So, and it's still not the number one thing in my life right now. So, it's just that I'm older, my body's more attuned and accustomed to the miles. And like I said, I think there's a few things there. I think I certainly have benefited from seeing a particular podiatrist, David Walker, down here. He helped me a lot through that transition from into the marathon, and knowing a lot about all the different shoes and selecting the right shoes at the time. That certainly had an influence in the change in my ability to handle load. But it is quite interesting that as soon as I stopped running on the grass and started running on paved roads or gravel, non-shifty surfaces, I tended to run better and just not get sore. So I think some of the things that I was told to do through no fault of the medical team, just that's what they thought was a good thing to do, to run on grass. I think in the end that probably hindered me more than it helped. Yeah, and then just going from that, putting yourself in cotton wool and then trying to then get on the track and do that hard track work. I just don't think my legs were, ready for it, because I kept getting the stress fracture, then having to build again, I was just kind of in a bit of a spiral. I think in the end, the marathon training suited me better, because I still had to get into, as per last year's PBs, I still have to get into really great 10K shape. But I don't need to worry about, 400 meter speed, if you know what I mean. I'm doing a lot of 400s rather than needing to run a 400 PB, or an 800 PB. I don't have to worry about that top end. I just need to be able to consistently hold a certain pace.
And possibly because back then, maybe when you getting the stresses in the tibias, you would have been wearing the spikes on the track, and you're probably not doing that these days. You might be doing unival work, but it'd just be on the road with normal shoes these days. Would that be right?
That's right.
Yeah.
My spikes are
Mm.
very clean, put it
Mm.
that way.
Sure. Sure. All right, let's chat about Ekiden. Absolutely huge over there in Japan. Lots of corporate money being thrown around, millions of TV viewers, lots of Japanese runners wanting to become rock stars and household names. Tell us about your experiences over there. You've done that a couple of times, I believe.
Yeah, Ekidin's really fun because you have that opportunity to go and run with, girls and now guys because it's mixed now, but at the time, girls who you're usually competing against, whereas now you're in the same team. So it's really fun to have that camaraderie and to be all working towards the same goal, and that's running as fast as we can for each other. So it's more about, you want to do well for each other than the sport being, all about yourself. So I really love that. Loved the that relay concept, and look, I hope it keeps going, and I hope Australia gets to continue to be part of it because it's something that I cherish. Some of those experiences and those early learning experiences in terms of international travel and what to eat and how to be flexible in a new environment. That those opportunities like Ekiden really give you that taste in a not so pressure cooker environment like an Olympics or a Com Games is.
Now, you mentioned before the track wasn't kind to you, beating up the legs, but you're quite good on the cross country. You picked up the under 23s national title back in '03, and then continued to place pretty highly at the states and nationals in the year after that. '07, you finished second and earned your first Australian singlet, I reckon it might have been, at the '07 World Cross over there in Mombasa, Kenya. Would that be correct?
Yeah, that's right.
Yep. Now that's a pretty iconic and fitting place to race your first World Cross.
That's right.
Yeah, yeah. Tell us about
Yeah.
that.
Yes, that was crazy. Yep, certainly for a timid girl at the time, I was, pretty shy person, and to go over and experience that as my first team was certainly set me up well because it was only going to get easier from there, I think,
Mm.
after Mombasa.
Yeah, who was on the team with
Yeah.
you that year?
So Dave McNeil,
Okay. Yep.
Dave is actually a neighbour. He's only a kilometre away from me, and so Dave, Michael, of course, Anna. I spent most of my cross country days with Anna Thompson, and we spent most of all of the races that we did together. We'd be roomies
Mm.
as many places as we had the opportunity to go to together.
Yep.
So we always loved, helping each other and supporting each other. And she was a phenomenal world cross and cross country runner. So I always, I always felt very inspired to be rooming with her.
Mm. Mm.
And look, it was very difficult conditions, as you know. I think it was like 38 degrees or something when we ran that race. I remember running, it was a lap course on a golf course. And as you would go through a lap, you would see these random deposits of racing spikes and socks
Mm.
along the course. And I think what was happening is anytime someone couldn't finish and they took their shoes off, they'd leave their shoes there. So there was all these, I remember all these shoes and all these spikes all over the course.
Okay.
And then finishing, I don't remember finishing, to be honest. I ran through, we ran through the finish line and there was some photos of us in some big drums of ice water. And there's some photos of us, and I don't really remember that. I remember being in a tent with Robbie O'Donnell, the physio, looking after us, and Karen Holzer. And I remember him telling me to put handing me ice and telling me to put it in all the different spots under your arms, in your groin, under the back of your knee and that sort of stuff to try and cool the body down.
Mm.
And so I remember him shouting at me, put this under here, put this here, trying to cool us all down in a mad panic. So it was pretty crazy. Certainly an experience, and certainly the exact opposite to what we experienced in Glasgow the following year. So
Yeah.
certainly chalk and cheese in 12 months.
Yeah, definitely. Look, 2007 is the Goldie half. You mentioned before you ran a 72.02, and that got you got you onto that team. I guess that would have been your second Aussie team that you'd made for the World Road Champs over there in Italy in October. Now you ran 72.53 there. So tell us about that trip.
Yeah, so both World Halves I did, the one in Hungary and the one in Udine in Italy. I actually got sick on both trips,
Okay.
so it was a very frustrating experience, but that's running. So it doesn't always pan out the way you plan. But yeah, the first trip I got a really bad stomach cramps, and the second was quite similar. I just think traveling to those remote places from Australia, where you don't have the same setup, as you do for Olympics, where you have a village and you're going into a hotel with the local food, and it's a long way, all the way to the top of Italy from Australia. So I think that I was proud of my race there, but I certainly learnt a lot about travel and the impacts of traveling so far to remote places has on trying to run at that world class level. So I think they were very early days in my career on that sort of scene. So as then and helped me, I guess, in if you look at it in a positive light, those experiences helped me for the marathon, because I then knew all the things I needed to do and where I should race marathons, and what sort of travel itinerary to look at and what food to pack for myself, and all of those smaller things that you need to plan out that have a big impact on a race, because I'd experienced two not so flash situations in terms of travel and location. I then was a bit more educated in what to do when it came to the marathon.
Yeah,
And so, so I think, once again, in the end, those experiences, although not what you wanted them to be, certainly, gave me that opportunity to learn and be ready for, what was to come in the years ahead.
yeah, sure. Now the Postie's starting to deliver Australian singlets to you quite regularly now. In our weight, you mentioned before back over to World Cross in Edinburgh in March. You finished 20th spot there. It's pretty impressive. A week later, pop in Ireland on the way to London for the 10K there, the Bupa 10K, finishing 5th in 32.57. And then, as you mentioned, debut marathon in London, 13th spot. Yeah, 2:32.22. That again, as you said, got you onto that Beijing Olympic team. So that's a pretty impressive 3 weeks. World Cross and then a 10K in Ireland and then your debut marathon. So there's a hell of a lot going on there. Let's just quickly talk about that.
Yeah, it was the World Cross was one of my favorite experiences ever in my career to date. It was, I think that year I won the trial. But once again, throughout my career, most people haven't really looked at me as, the top athlete or the, most talented or the fastest or the best or any of that sort of stuff. I'm always sort of that bridesmaid, in people's minds, and the one that tries really hard, and which isn't a bad thing, because that's kind of who I am. I am the one that tries really hard. And so I guess no one really had huge expectations for me at World Cross, that year. But, I had certainly developed and strung together a much better, year or so of training with Pam at the time for that cross country race. She'd really put me in great shape for World Cross, and I'd experienced the World Cross in Kenya the year before. So I had that, under my belt to work with for Glasgow. The conditions were different. They were muddy, like a traditional cross country. There was a nice hill to climb up each lap, and we had a great team of girls, very inspiring, with Melissa and Vicky Mitchell and Benita and Anna, Melissa Rollinson. So it was a great team to be part of. And I remember running the last lap and hearing over the speaker that if we were to pass the two Americans who were just in front of me, that we would take the bronze. And so I was running my heart out towards that bronze medal, and it was such a wonderful feeling passing those two Americans and knowing that, even though I was in 20th place, we were going to get the team bronze medal. So you can't ever forget a moment like that. And
Sure.
I'm very grateful for the girls for all their hard running, because it was a fantastic fantastic World Cross, and really something that I'll always cherish and have in my mind to this day.
Yeah, definitely. And I guess that would have been our first and only medal since in the
Yeah,
teams. Yep.
since then, I'd say so since. I'm not sure if whether we've won any others, but certainly I don't think we've won any since.
All right, debut marathon. Now, you mentioned before, Lachlan said, look, you're going to be over there. How about London Marathon? So when yourself and Pam were building up for the World Cross, I assume the 10K in Ireland was just a fill-in for the marathon, or was that sort of like, I'm wondering how far out did you say I'm going to do these 3 races, or was it something that one led to another, or?
Yeah, so I stayed. So after World Cross, I stayed with Nick Bordeaux's team in London for that 2 weeks, and he arranged for me to be able to get a spot at London Marathon. And so I spent a fair bit of time for that 2 weeks with Vicky Mitchell, and she was running the 10K, and a few of the boys were running as well. I think Marty Dent, Andrew Leatherby was certainly running as well. So I was fortunate to join those guys and have a run in that race in Ireland, and I'd never been there before. I haven't been back yet either, but it was really great opportunity to go and run that 10K, because it was on, and it was something I wasn't really necessarily going to get the opportunity to do again. So so we did that, and that was fun, and went on to it's out in a park, and I didn't see much of Ireland because we stayed at the airport hotel, ran the race, and then headed back.
Okay.
But it was certainly a good opportunity to experience and get everything out of that 3-week period that I was there over in that part of the world. And then I went on to do London. I was not really sure. Obviously, it was my first marathon, and I'd been told lots of different things about the marathon. Things like when you get to 35K, you're just going to feel like you don't want to go on. So be ready, and all those positive things.
Yep.
So I had no idea what this whole experience was going to be like. And I wasn't running. I wasn't marathon training as such. I was really training more for the cross country that I'd ran 2 weeks earlier than I was as a marathoner. I certainly didn't have the mileage and all of that in my legs, just because of the fact that I'd been such an injury-prone athlete. We didn't want to, jump into a big marathon block straight away,
Sure.
and unravel everything that I'd achieved to date. So I think I was running about 110 Ks a week probably for that race, and just focusing on all the work that I wanted to do for the cross-country race. And I set out in that race, and I didn't really worry about anyone else that was in the race. I just set had my splits. I knew what I wanted to try and achieve, and I pretty much ran the whole thing on my own, and came out just shy of trying to crack that 232, that sub 232. So so very different experience. We had a bit of a misty, quite sleety rain came on with about 5 miles to go. So we had a headwind with sleet in that last 5 miles. So it was a bit, that I guess that was that moment of, that's when the quads hurt, and I wasn't really, didn't have well-trained quads like I do now. So I got a bit sore at that point, from pounding that pavement for so long and having not done as much work as I've done more recently. But it was still, it wasn't that bad. I did really want to stop, and I was glad when the finish line came, but it wasn't as bad as what I'd been told it was going to be like.
So there was no big fade. You might have dropped a little bit per K, but not a heap.
That's right, and I think a lot of that was to do with the fact that we, hit this headwind and this sleet more than anything really. So it's all part of the journey.
And that 232 got you on the team for Beijing, as you mentioned. What was the actual Olympic qualifying time?
You had to run, so I can't remember what the world athletic standard was at the
Mm,
time,
mm.
but it was in the 240s, I think,
Okay.
or 238. I think it might have been 238 for the
Yeah,
world
right.
athletics.
Yeah.
But that at the time, Athletics Australia set 232 as our benchmark.
Okay.
And I was very fortunate that they still, I was the only other qualifier anyway. So it's not like I was, Benita and Kate had qualified and there was no one else that had ran
Okay.
anywhere near their time. So, yeah, so it was good. I was next in line and they did take me even though I hadn't gone under the 232. So I'm really fortunate that that happened because that kicked off my career.
Yeah, first Olympics. Obviously every athlete's dream. Now you ran 2:34.16 there, finishing 33rd. Any other Aussie girls finish in front of you? Or how did the other girls go?
Yeah, Benito was about 22nd, I think, maybe
Okay. Yep.
first or 22nd.
And what, high 28s
Um,
or like 29s, or do you know what she ran? Was
I
she in the 30s as
I
well?
can't remember. I'd have to look that up.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah,
Mm.
yeah. So yeah, look, I ran pretty much within myself in that race.
Yep.
I was advised by a few people to run within, run a bit slower and, go out a bit slow. And so I went out slower, but then I just came home pretty comfortable. So I was probably a bit disappointed with that Olympics because I had a bit too much in the tank for that one. So, but I'd only had a few months to prepare, and I wasn't really a marathoner as such at the time. I was finding my way, and yeah, so just made me a bit more hungry for the next one in Berlin in 2009.
Yeah. And did you get to experience much of the Olympics?
Yeah, look, I knew I had a bit too much left in the tank after the race because I ended up walking the Great Wall the next day
Okay.
with
Yeah.
the Olympic team. But yeah, you don't know. You follow people's advice, I guess, in the end that that we're there to tell you what they thought you should do, and so I followed that. But I didn't follow it to the letter to be honest. I was told to go out in like 2:38, and I didn't go out in that slow because it just was too slow. But I think I could have gone out certainly a lot quicker than what I went out in, and so I just basically ran the same pace throughout the race from memory, and then felt pretty good that second week, and yeah, got to go and walk the Great Wall, and I had my IBM colleagues in China put on a party for me as well at the IBM office. So that was a nice cultural experience. And yeah, so it was a nice trip, and certainly then going on to London. London was amazing and very different, and then Rio, very different again. So all very different experiences across all of the Olympics so far.
Now, as you mentioned there, yeah, '09 off to Berlin for the Worlds again, 2:30.42. Then in April 2010, you win your first marathon over there in Nagano. You ran your first sub 2:30 there, running 2:28.48. That's pretty huge. First sub 2:30 and winning a major marathon. Tell us about that one.
Yeah, that was an opportunity I had. So I started working with Derek Frood as a manager. He was good friends with Dick, and so it was a really good chance to get his support to, start to get me into different races and experience different things. So that year I had the opportunity to run at Nagano. It was, Locke and I went over and with Kate Smythe as well. And her husband Craig. So we had a small contingent of us Aussies over there. And yeah, look, I was running along, and I'd really, after the 2009 World Champs, I'd had that experience under my belt, and I was starting to progress with a bit more mileage. And I was being coached by Dick at that point in 2009. And so we thought running a marathon where I'd have a group of men and women together would be a good experience for me. So that's why Nagano sort of hit the spot. And I was running along. I got to halfway. I remember I got to 5 or 10K mark, and the favourite actually not just did a sweep and knocked all the drink bottles off the table. So I didn't get a drink, in the early part of the race, which was a different experience.
You
And
mean
then
on
as
purpose?
we, yeah, well, I
You're
would
not
hate to
sure.
accuse, but it seemed very much on.
All right. An
It seemed very
accidental coat hanger.
uncoordinated if it really if it was.
Okay.
So we went along, ran along, and then by the time we got to halfway, all the other competitors had dropped off. And so it certainly was a different experience for me because I'd said to Lachlan earlier that, look, I'm ready to, run my heart out and go through this potential painful experience that the marathon provides. And I didn't have to do that in the end. I was running well at the pace and running along nicely at the, in that sub 2:30 pace, and then in the end, the rest of the field just dropped off. So it was, yeah, certainly. And I was leading and running along going, wow, I'm winning the Nagano Marathon. So it was a very different experience to what we had expected. I expected to be racing to the finish line, basically.
Yeah.
I thought I had a chance at winning the event, but I thought in order to do that, I'd at least be racing two athletes to the death.
Yeah.
But yeah, it didn't pan out that way. So
Yeah.
it then allowed me in the second half to just focus on my pace and my cadence, and just keep trying to target that 2:28 that we were going after.
I mean, they must have treated you like royalty over there. They love their marathon running in Japan. Was that right or?
Oh, they were lovely when
Yeah.
we walked into the hotel. They
Yeah.
were all in the hotel, and handing out flowers and
Sure.
gifts. And yeah, look, it's wonderful running a marathon in Japan.
Yeah.
They're so kind, and
Yeah.
it's a great experience.
Yeah, and that's what's going to make the Olympics more special. I think they're going to do a great job at it. Look, in these early days, I'm just interested with your marathon running. Like, were you still trying to fine tune your nutrition, and even today, do you have sort of a set thing that you go to, or are you still playing around with it, or never had any issues with taking in nutrition, no stomach upsets or anything like that?
I've been okay up until Chicago, but I don't think that's necessarily to do with the nutrition that I had. I'm pretty sure that it was a food poisoning.
Yep.
So I have had the same plan from Dick throughout my
Okay.
marathons,
Yep.
with some tweaks in terms of the volume
Yeah.
of, because it really depends on the weather. So I've
Sure.
ran a lot of hot weather marathons
Yep.
in my career.
Yep.
I've tried to bypass a few, so I haven't nominated for a few world championships just because of what it does to your body,
Yep.
running in the heat so often. So, I've had to forego nominating for a few of them,
Okay.
just because every single one seems to be in the heat.
Yeah.
With the Moscow and the Daegu
Yep.
and all of those. So yeah, so it's but after Chicago, because I was so sick, vomiting from about 28K through to the end, I was just continually vomiting, which was horrible. I then just couldn't stomach the same drinks that I had been having,
Yep.
and gels.
Okay.
So it wasn't that there was anything wrong with them.
Yeah.
It was just that I have these memories
Yeah,
and this
sure.
feeling of,
Yep. Yep.
So as soon as I got Chicago disappointment out of my system, got home, spent a week over there, and then got home. I ended up working with Jess Rothwell, and she actually set up a new plan, a new set of drinks, and I'm using the 32 GI product, and that really worked well in Osaka in January. I'm taking more carbs in that race. I took on more carbs through that product, and through all the trialing over Christmas when I got back from Chicago, and I negative split at Osaka and came home really strong and feeling really great in that second half. So so I think that you've got to be prepared to trial new things.
Yeah, sure.
But this was a little bit different, just because there was three of us that ended up with some stomach problems. So Steph Bruce and Betsy Sainer and I all had some issues, and so unfortunate, but that's so it's given, but once again, an opportunity to then tweak tweak things because you tend not to change things if they're not broken. But perhaps it's the change, that change is what I need for a good 2021.
Now let's head back 2010. You won that Goldie half. That was actually 3 minutes and 2 seconds faster than when you won it in 2007. 3 minutes and 2 seconds faster when you won it, and you won them both. So that's incredible. Then you ran the marathon 3 months later at your first Com Games. I guess it would have been in Delhi. That's where you picked up the bronze medal, running at 2:35:25. So it's not a bad Com Games start.
It was hot.
Yeah, yeah. I know. I believe it took you a
Yeah,
while to get over that one, and probably did a lot of
it
athletes.
did.
Yeah.
Yeah, it definitely took a long time to get over that one. I think I ended up getting a stress fracture in my sacrum at
Okay.
the end of that year,
Yeah.
if I can remember rightly. And yeah, look, it was the training itself was grueling, because we knew what we had to prepare for. Then we spent a bit of time in Townsville and Cairns as well, I think it was. No, that year I spent Townsville. I had time in Townsville for Beijing Olympics. Then I had time in Palm Cove and Cairns with Michael and Dick and Lachlan for Com Games. But I actually, while I was in Cairns on the training camp, there was one Sunday, the Sunday before the race, where it started raining really heavy, and we were out on a Sunday run, and I actually tweaked my quad in this Sunday run, running sort of through the dirt roads. Then I think it was about 4 days I couldn't run before Delhi. So it's pretty stressful because, we'd done all this work, we'd done all the grueling training, and it was a bit 50-50 around how I was going to, be right for the race day. But thankfully it settled a fair bit, and then I was able to run reasonably comfortably. I think later on, like everything hurts when you're running a marathon in the last 10K. So, it was probably exacerbated a bit by that and by all the stress on the body from that race. But but certainly having that, having had all the work in my legs and all of that in the lead up, the mind was certainly willing to push myself as hard as possible to try and medal. So so it certainly didn't go to nice and smoothly, that build up. There's always something that seems to happen to give you a bit of a stress to worry about in the lead up, but thankfully it worked out to secure a medal, because we'd certainly worked pretty hard for that.
I see there in 2011, I had the wind knocked out of your sails there in the early part of 2011, and headed over to Frankfurt at the end of October and ran a 2:29:23, finishing 12th. So nice to keep that sub 2:30 box tick there.
Yeah, so both Locke and I ended up getting osteitis pubis and a sacral stress fracture at Christmas. So at Christmas time of 2010. So we ended up trying to get back and run that marathon off a very small build up. So in Frankfurt. Yep. We went over to Boulder with Michael because I thought, I can't do this. This is going to be a tough ask to try and qualify. And so we decided, let's go away for the first time, and not work at the time, and get a bit of an altitude experience, and just put everything into it, because I was going to need it. I had a really short window to go from being totally injured and hadn't run for months to, running an Olympic qualifier. I remember the first session on the Boulder Reservoir. I think it was only like 10 by 1 minute, and we could barely finish it. It was that's how unfit I was.
Yeah.
And then I think I had to then race 8 weeks later in Frankfurt. So we certainly went from zero to a good enough level of fitness to get the qualifier in a very short space of time. And so I'm really proud of that race. But I remember running down the last couple of last 2 or 3K, and I had like tears running down my face because it was so painful, because I hadn't ran one for a long time, and I'd been through so many injuries since the Com Games, and I had tears running down my face, going, I'm going to make this qualifying time, but my gosh, this hurts.
Yeah, yeah.
So, yeah, the things that you put yourself through, hey?
Sure, sure. You just tell yourself, in an hour I'll be sitting around having a drink, laughing about it all. So
That's right.
that's generally what I
That's
say to
right.
myself when it's getting ugly. Look, 2012 New York City half in March, running 70-10, 2K road wins in June at Lawney and Brisbane. You're going 32:17 and 32:46 there. Before your second Olympic gig over there in London in August. Now, imagine this was a PB, 2:27:32, finishing 16th.
It was, yeah. Yeah, at the time, obviously you always want to run faster and, so you have, lofty goals all the time and sometimes you don't run as fast, but certainly couldn't complain with running a PB in Olympics because there's not much more you can ask of yourself than doing that. So,
Yep.
yeah, it was, it was amazing Olympics, London, everything was so well organised. Most of the time I don't have the ability to have Dick in the village or have him around. And for London, we couldn't even, I couldn't even have him at the start in terms of available accreditation passes. But the most amazing thing happened in the lead up to that race, and we were bussed out to the start and in the tent, and then thankfully Dick was able to connect with someone that he knew, and he was able to then come in, accompanied by security with Lachlan and see me right at the tent before the start of the race. And so those little things stick in your mind. We were having a photo with the guards on the finish line, just before the race, and
Yeah.
I felt like to have a hug from them and
Sure.
a last few words and all of that is certainly has an impact on your positivity and your mental state when you're about to run a race like that. So if I think of anything related to London, I think of that pre-race experience that we had that I didn't think I would get. So so that was London. I think certainly loved running that course, and I remember I didn't see it was very busy. It was packed streets in London for the marathon, and very noisy, so it was hard to pick anyone out in the crowd. But I remember seeing one of my idols as a junior, Natalie, who ran for Doncaster, and I remember her sticking her arm out at one point on the course. And waving her arm and yelling out my name, and she's the only person I recognised from the whole from the whole course. But it was so nice to just see her in amongst seas of people.
Yeah.
In that event. Yeah,
Fantastic.
certainly can't complain with that. Having that London experience is certainly at an Olympics certainly tops off all of the others. That's for sure.
Yeah, no, fantastic.
So far,
Yeah, no.
hopefully Tokyo might change that.
Yes, we hope so, for sure.
But it certainly was my most favourite.
Okay, Lisa, so 2013 starts off at 2:29:09 over there in Osaka in January, where you finish fourth. You end up winning your second marathon here in home soil in Melbourne, where you ran that incredible 2:26:05. So a memorable day racing there at home among friends and family. Tell us about that.
Yeah, look, I guess what happened there with the backstory of that is that I ran London Olympics and ran a PB and felt like I was progressing, but I was knocked back again for any, sort of national support, with our governing body. And I didn't have a shoe sponsor. And so I was really quite a bit, disappointed after that, running so well at the Olympics and still sort of being told that I wasn't good enough for, to be on, progression track for, within the sport, and that I had to run faster and, and similarly to get any sort of sponsorship help. And so I had signed up to Osaka, but Lachlan actually got injured over the summer, and I really struggled with motivation to prepare for Osaka. I went anyway and ran, and I did the best I could. Ended up getting a really sore calf partway through the race, and so it was a bit of a disappointing experience, but one that I just kind of chalked up to, well, my head wasn't really in the game, and I was elsewhere in my thought process, and it's probably the result that I really deserved given the commitment I had given for that one. But that made me quite ready, and not so much angry, but ready to tackle another campaign and do it really well and give it my all. And then I was told by our federation that I had to run under 226 at the time to gain any support. So I sort of had this target, in the back of my mind as well. And, we did everything we could, and I ran, I'm so proud of the Melbourne race. I mean, I gave it everything I could and went through in the splits that I was sort of targeting. And fortunately, I won the race, which is fabulous, and I loved it, every minute of it. But unfortunately, I didn't quite get the sub 226. So once again, I was knocked back for any sort of support. So, it was a bit of that happy and sad moment of running a big PB,
Sure.
finishing in the MCG with your family, but not quite hitting that time. I think it was only, 5 or 6 seconds
yeah.
off.
I mean,
So,
sub 226
yeah.
is pretty fast back in 13 to gain funding, isn't it?
Yeah, so that was the disappointment
Sure.
of the whole time, but it certainly wasn't the story, the main story. It was,
Yep.
we were pretty excited to have that experience, to win Melbourne, to win it with, where I had competition to get there, and I had to really race it and make good decisions throughout that race to make sure I came through with the win. It was a bit nerve-wracking because it got to like the 40K mark before I passed her, but we got there, and that's the main thing, hey?
Yeah, no, fantastic. 2014, 2015, things go a bit quiet. No Glasgow Com Games due to the birth of your son Peter. Now, imagine you couldn't have gone too long without a run. So what were you sort of doing during that time to sort of maintain some sort of fitness? Because you came back pretty fit.
Not a lot, actually.
Okay.
Yeah, so I ended up getting a sacral stress fracture in the lead up to it was sort of Christmas time. And obviously, at the time, I was hoping for a big result in Glasgow, and I was, going to be announced for that team, given all of the PBs and where I'd sat in the list and of qualifiers. So that was all the planning and where we were heading. And then at Christmas time, I got a sacral stress fracture, just completely random. We were out doing some 1-minute efforts, fartlek, and I got back, and that afternoon I was just sitting on the computer doing a few things, and when I tried to get up, I couldn't put any pressure on my leg, and had this shooting pain in my sacral area. And so once I learnt that, the doctors said that I had to have 3 months off. And so I said to Locke, well, this may be a sign. Perhaps we've wanted to start a family. So, and we were going to do that immediately after Glasgow if I could do it, if we could fall pregnant quickly enough. And so we thought, well, this might be the universe telling us what to do.
Sure.
And so fortunately for us, 2 things happened. The injury healed really quickly. I ended up using the Ultra G after about 4.5 weeks. I got on the Ultra G for the first time and used that. And I actually got fit. I was meant to run the New York City half as well. And obviously I didn't continue that campaign, but I got really fit, and we had a wedding in the US at the time in March, and so we went over for that, and I was running around Central Park, and I started to feel I did a lap, and I thought, wow, I'm really fit. I can't believe how amazing I feel. I might be ready for the Com Games, and and so we thought, oh yeah, we'll be right for Com Games. And then when we got back from the trip, we realised that I was pregnant, so
Okay.
we had a different celebration.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, so really, I'm really glad that I was able to fall pregnant so quickly, because you worry as a female distance runner, whether it's going to take a while and whether you're going to have challenges there. So. We were so over the moon that it happened so quickly, and Pete's a little champ, so certainly been the best thing I've done in my life, and I know Lachlan will say the same thing, that he's a little gem.
Yeah, fantastic. And his middle name's Richard, named after your current coach. That's a very nice thing.
That's right.
Yeah.
Both our fathers are Peter, so he's Peter. He's the little Peter, although he's now being he's going to be the tallest Peter, I think, in the 3 Peters. And Richard for three very strong influences in his life.
Yeah,
So yeah.
fantastic. All right,
Yeah.
2016 Olympic year, Rio. You head over to Houston in January, finishing second, running a 2:27.25. So not a bad start back to the marathon career.
Yeah, it was fun going to Houston. Lachlan, my husband, went to Rice University over there, so it was great place to return to marathon running. And like we had Pete, and I had accepted the fact that maybe we would be able to get back, and maybe we wouldn't. You just don't know how your body's going to respond. And I didn't run through my pregnancy. I did a few little, in the first trimester, I just felt so exhausted just trying to work and create Pete that I couldn't run very much. In the second, I ran a little bit and did just some, 5-minute jog, 1-minute walk. And that would have only been for about maybe 4 weeks. And then in the third trimester, I was so out of proportion because I basically had a ginormous whale belly and not really much anywhere else. So I just was completely out of proportion and uncomfortable. So the idea of trying to run with that body shape just wasn't
Sure. Yeah.
wasn't going to work. So we didn't start training again until the 3 months off post cesarean. I ended up having a cesarean, so because he couldn't get out of my small frame.
Yep.
We tried, but he couldn't get out. So 3 months after, I then started to do my walk jogging, and that started off with I tried to walk to the park 400 meters, and I could barely make it and had to sit down on the park bench.
Yeah. Okay.
So that was a very funny experience,
Yeah.
having been a marathoner. And so we got back into things, got ready, went to, I think my first race was actually the half marathon in Melbourne that year, and then we went on 2 months later and ran Houston, which was really great to get a second place at a big marathon like that, with a nice half a dozen or so talented African women to race against. So yeah, it's good fun.
Then you win the Sydney Half in May in 72.07, then jump on that plane over to Rio. Now, you ran a 2:34.41, but things didn't go to plan. Tell us about that one.
Yeah, look, we trained the house down.
Yep.
Probably trained the best I've ever trained in my career in Noosa under Dick's watchful eye.
Yep.
We did a lot more than I've ever done before. More mileage, more long runs, longer long runs. Just the training was really great. Then we all had to go to a camp in Florida, which was mandated, and it was just a really bad experience for me. I got to Florida and I met up with Michael Shelley, and we went for a 30-minute run, and I could barely make it through 30 minutes. I just picked up a sinus infection, and I felt really dizzy, and it was stiflingly hot in Florida. Tried to do, get over that. Tried to do a few, of the mini sessions. They were okay, but I just did not feel right, and I felt quite dizzy after those sessions. And then we went over, obviously, then on a red eye to Rio, and went through that travel experience. And by race day, I was just not feeling great at all. Ran the race, but at 20K, I remember shaking my head at Nikki Frey saying, I'm in trouble.
Okay.
I'm in trouble. It's like I'm not feeling well at all. And I was like, well, it's an Australian singlet, it's an Australian team, it's an Olympics. I'm going to either finish this race, get to the finish line somehow, or I'm going to be carted off in an ambulance, one of the two. So I'm not going to physically pull out myself. It's going to either happen to me, or I'm going to, crawl across the line. So made for a very difficult interview at the end with the girls, because trying to stand there and not throw up on everyone's shoes was an interesting experience on national television.
Yeah.
But that's, like I said earlier, if you're in this sport for long enough, you have lots of ups and downs, and you just got to get on with it. Yeah.
Yeah, certainly. 2017, back to London in April. Now, you run your PB there, as we've spoken, that 2:25.15. If my research is correct, you may know this, is that the fourth fastest women's marathon time by an Australian? Because I got
Yes,
yeah,
that's
so I
right.
got
Yep.
Benita at 2:22.36 in Chicago in '06. Then Sinead Diver over there in London last year, 2:24.11. Lisa Ondieki in 2:24.40 back in New York in '92.
Lisa's ran a 2:23, so Lisa's in
2:23.
second.
Okay,
Yep.
there you go. I missed that one.
Yeah.
That's gonna take some beatings at 2:23.
2:23:40-ish, I think.
Okay, yeah, right, yeah,
Uh,
yep, and yeah, Benita 2:22.36. Yeah, hopefully you girls can chase that one down the next couple of years.
well, yeah. I mean, it's a nice goal.
Yep,
Yeah, it's certainly a nice goal.
yep,
And yeah, look, it's not something that I really think about or,
yep,
I'm just, yeah, obviously every time we go out and run a race, the goal is to try and run faster than you ever have before. So if it turns out that, I mean, my goal would be to run as good as Lisa Ondiki and
yep.
because she's my idol.
Okay, yep,
And so, yeah, so being able to achieve that, which was the goal for Chicago last year, would be, great in itself. But Benita's an absolutely amazing athlete, and so yeah, so to hit that time is a whole nother level. But yeah, hopefully
yeah.
someone will get it eventually. Yeah, it'll happen one day.
Let's talk about
Yeah.
2018 Gold Coast Com Games. Now there was a lot going on up there. It's been pretty successful for you up there in the half marathons over the years. 2:33.23. I've got you down there for in second spot. So let's talk about that one.
Yeah, look, I don't really think about the times, to be
Sure.
honest, in those hot weather
Yep.
ones. Like, they don't really mean a lot.
Yep.
The times, it's really about the place.
Sure.
So, you're going out in a pack and
Yep.
running the pace that really that the other runners kind of set for you. So we ran pretty slow, like probably the slowest I've ever ran the first 5K in a marathon.
Yep.
In that Gold Coast, the start of Gold Coast. So, and that because basically it was really hot, the sun was burning, even early that early in the morning.
Yep.
And so it was about making sure that you're going to be able to finish strong. And there was certainly no prizes for, doing anything too crazy
Yep.
at the start or in the middle of the race.
Mm.
Yeah, so we set out, and there was a period of around, I don't know, 14, 15K, I think, where Jess kind of took the lead and just pushed us to progress the pace a little bit. But I just kind of stuck at the pace that I was comfortable at the time, and just didn't want to do any big jumps in change of pace. So yeah, so I know it sort of looked like I fell off, but it was kind of just me just doing my own thing and wanting to make sure I was comfortable in that second half. And yeah, just sort of progressed through and got back on to the girls. And yeah, then we sort of just ran together for quite a large part of the race until that latter stage when when Helania took off, and off we went and tried our very best to hold on and get to the finish line, really.
Yeah.
In
Yeah.
the heat. Yeah.
Sure.
So yeah, I just saw she ran Valencia on the weekend and broke 2:20.
Oh
So
wow. Okay.
Jess and I, yeah, we should be really proud of our races on the Gold Coast, because she's certainly blown it out of the park since then. So hopefully that's good signs for the two of us.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you picked up the
Yeah.
bronze there in Delhi in 2010, and yeah, like 14, pregnant with Pete. So I guess up there in 2018, you're hoping to go one spot further than you did. But yeah, look, there may be another opportunity at the next Com Games to grab that number one spot. That's for sure.
Yeah, so it's all just depends on, what happens and how it's all structured,
Sure.
because I think we've got World Champs and Com Games at the same
Yeah,
time,
it's a
or
funny year.
practically at the same
Yeah,
time. Yeah,
yeah,
so but for now, I guess the key focus is on trying to get that, get a good PB in the marathon next year,
yep.
and then get that spot for Tokyo.
Look, Olympic year in Tokyo next year. Let's have a quick chat about that. What are you going to do between now and then, and will you do another marathon?
Yeah, look, we've had it a little harder in Melbourne.
Yep.
So, with our hour of exercise and all of that,
Yep.
and not knowing when we can race. So we just kind of maintained a level of fitness, but certainly not wanting to put ourselves into any sort of hole, especially when the virus was, at its peak here. So
Yep.
just wanted to make sure we were always just fit and healthy
Yep.
really,
Yep.
until we had some plans. So now we've got some plans. We can, I think a little bit of track has started in a small contained
Sure.
environment, and we've got Zertepec in January, which is a potential option. And then got Hobart Bridge Run probably in Feb. So they've got the big race this weekend in Launceston,
Yeah.
but I'm
Yep.
just wanting to build now and
Sure.
just get ready for most likely the February bridge run and have another crack at running a PB there, and bettering my time from that a couple of years ago there. So that's the next one on the cards, and then we'll just look at what other races are likely to go ahead from there. I think there's a likely opportunity in April for us to have a qualification race for the marathon.
Okay.
That's still getting worked out,
Yep.
and that would be in Australia, just because there's not really any opportunities internationally to have another run.
Sure.
So if that all gets organised by Athletics Australia, then I'll be ready to go and do that.
Yep.
And so that's what I'm gearing up for now, to be ready for a marathon in that April month.
Sure. Unreal.
To try and run a PB and
Yeah.
secure a spot.
Yeah, no, that'd be fantastic. There's been a bit of chatter about Athletics Australia putting up a qualifying marathon rather than have to do Hobart or Canberra. So yeah, hopefully that goes ahead, and that'd be fantastic for everyone to watch and for you girls to race.
Yeah, and I think it'd be nice to have. I mean, most of the Olympics I haven't ran a marathon prior to the
Sure.
actual race in that year.
Okay.
But this time, we haven't raced for such a long time,
Yeah.
and so this time it might be a good thing. It'll be a little bit too close to the Olympics.
Yeah.
But that's how the cookie crumbles. So
Yeah.
we need to just roll with it.
Yeah, and I guess it'll give those other girls a chance to get that ticket to Tokyo. So they'll be keen for it as well.
Yeah, that's right.
Yep.
And I think we all just need a bit of racing,
Yep.
to get another go.
Yeah, no, fantastic. Look, that's a wrap, Lisa. Thank you so much for your time today.
No worries.
Really appreciate it. I know you got a lot on. Have a fantastic Chrissy New Year break.
Thanks, you too.
Yeah, I will. Go easy on the ciders. And look, we're all going to be glued to the TV next August, watching all the Aussies compete. So yeah, we're really looking forward to it. Now, can I just whack a link over to Instagram and over to your blog site? It's got some interesting reading. That'd be fantastic.
Great.
No worries, Lisa. Thanks again.
Lovely.
Okay, cheers. All right, guys, that's a wrap for 2020. Looking forward to bringing some more guests to you in the new year. If you're listening from Apple device, please give me an early Christmas present with a rating and review. It's not necessarily to boost my ego. It's there just so this can get out to some more listeners. You guys are in control of that. There's not much I can do, so I'd really appreciate it if you could do that. Like and share the episode. Enjoy your Christmas break, New Year break. I love it. It's a fantastic time of year. Hopefully get back to some normality 2021, get to see all these athletes compete at the Olympics, maybe jump on a big bird, head overseas, do a race. Yeah, really looking forward to it. I think everyone's really going to be amped up and going well. So thank you very much. Have a great Christmas, and I'll chat soon. Bye.